your children go to this school, ma'am?
No, they don't. They go to a religious school not far away.
Well, what is the reason for your presence on the picket line today?
I believe the children in the Bedford-Stuyvesant area deserve their own school. They shouldn't have to be bused and used as pawns by politicians.
In 1954, the United States Supreme Court set aside the Kansas statute that permitted cities of 15,000 or more to maintain separate schools for black and white students, ruling that segregation is inherently unequal. This case became known as Brown versus the Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas. In 1955, the court asked that desegregation proceed with all deliberate speed.
In 1969, schools were a little different than they are today. We didn't have, schools were not integrated per se. Coming out of high school, there were separate school systems in Alabama. And then most towns had their own little school system that operated two schools.
While most states began the process of integration, in some states, this led to violence. The most notable instance was the defiance in 1957 of federal orders by the governor of Arkansas, who called out the Arkansas National Guard to prevent integration in Little Rock. President Eisenhower responded by sending federal troops to enforce the court order for integration.
Brown versus the Board of Education, they said separate but equal was illegal. And that started in the 50s, and it was into the 60s that this started to be enforced in the South. So in 1968, they came up with a program that was called Freedom of Choice. And that's where children were allowed to choose which school they wanted to go to. So there are different choices that were made by different people through different areas in the South. As we look at it, a lot has come from then. So therefore, that was the only perspective of education that had been known.
In 1958, Virginia closed 9 schools in 4 counties rather than have them integrated. In Louisiana, whites boycotted the integrated New Orleans public schools. In 1961, 2 black students registered at the University of Georgia, but were suspended because of student disorders. In Mississippi, when a black man registered for school at the University of Mississippi, a mob attacked and 2 people were killed. The next day, federal troops occupied Oxford, and James Meredith became the first African American to attend a Mississippi public school with white students in accordance with the 1954 court decision. And in Alabama, in 1963, Governor George C. Wallace stood in a doorway at the University of Alabama in a symbolic attempt to block 2 black students from enrolling. The attempt failed.
As we look at these time periods, we see that times have changed. People have worked to learn to work together in a different society, but you learn about different cultures. For a long time, the only culture you knew about was the culture you lived in, and the other one you read about in a book of some type or some nature. As we look at it, as times have changed, there have been people who have learned to work together, to live together, and though that's where we are in 2014, that we are able to have some of these conversations going on.
The Civil Rights Act of 1964 is the nation's benchmark civil rights legislation, and it continues to resonate in America. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 prohibits discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. Passage of the act ended the application of Jim Crow laws. The Civil Rights Act was eventually expanded by Congress to strengthen enforcement of these fundamental civil rights.
Well, I think as a country we have definitely made a lot of great strides since the 1950s and 1960s. I think as far as racism, and definitely institutional racism isn't really around anymore, and that's a great thing.
This made everybody be able to go to school together. The process that worked here in Auburn City Schools, they started with the 10th grade, the upcoming 10th grade, and they were coming to Auburn High School. Later on, they gradually moved all the grades to Auburn High School and made the other schools smaller groups, elementary schools, so that these would be serviceable for the school system. So everybody was going to school all the time. As we begin to look at the longevity of this program, we see that sometimes students have benefited from learning to work with people, to be included in part of society.
Some may ask, are we better? Have we finished all that we need to do? I would honestly say no. I think that we've worked.
But I do think that it on its own can happen. And I think the point is when we start seeing ourselves as individuals, and individuals that are equal in the eyes of our Creator, that are free individuals that make their own contribution to society. I think that's ultimately what we need to see ourselves as, and we need to avoid one way or another, putting people in groups.
There has been if you look in terms of the society fully integrated, my answer to that would be no. Because there are still some times you walk around and see people who don't interact with these people. We have kids who go to school with each other that don't know their names. They don't associate with each other. They don't have any type of doings other than sometimes in school. So fully integrated, no. There's progress being made, but there's a lot of different areas and long ways to go.
Obviously, it will always exist. I mean, we're people, and people will always be flawed. But I think as a whole, our society has become a lot more integrated. It's a good thing for a free society like ours. It's good to have a diversity of backgrounds and of opinions and things.
Integration has been more successful than I think anybody that went through it during the 60s could ever imagine. I know that we still have work to do, but I can see it every day in the hallways that we're kind of learning to live with each other.